Okay, hi. This is Amol Kane. Welcome to the NRI study podcast. So,
Hi,
Amol,
Nupur.
I wanted to introduce you to my readers because I know you for I don't know how many years. We studied together engineering at
Yes.
COEP. And then, can you just go ahead and tell the audience what you did after studying civil engineering at COEP?
Uh, Hi, everybody. My name is Amol. Uh, my educational background started with civil engineering in Pune. Then I went on to do my master's in the same at Georgia Tech in Atlanta. After that, I worked for a few years in the US, 1 year in the UK, then back in the US. And about 10-ish years ago, I moved back to India, uh, join my family business. Uh, I've been working in India ever since. However, in the middle of all that, in addition to getting married and having a kid and all, career-wise, I decided to take a 1 year sabbatical in 2015-16 again, and got my MBA from Oxford. And then I moved back, and I'm working on a few other, ventures out here.
Awesome. So that's super, super impressive. And you've done something really unique. You've not only lived in three different countries, UK, US, India, you've also done an MBA after having a kid. So kudos to you. I just wanted to start talking about your move to the US. So the first question, if you could help us answer, is when you moved to the US, did you always know you were going to come back and join your father's business?
No, not at all, actually. I think I've been fortunate in the sense that my parents were, very open. Uh, they said that, you want to study. In fact, you should study. So go ahead, get your higher degree, work there for a few years, and see where the opportunities take you. And
Hmm.
I think that having that freedom in my mind helped. That I worked, I think, for about 5-ish years overseas. And at the end of the fourth year or beginning of the fifth, I decided, what, I'm looking for two things that I'm not finding there,
Hmm.
typically flexibility and diversity. So then I thought, let me move to India. Like, I wanted to move away from the whole H1 gamut.
So the flexibility you're talking about is in terms of visa and doing something on your own.
Right. I mean, you've been there. Your early years in the US or UK, wherever you go, are more driven by your immigration status than what you want.
Do you feel like you could have stayed a little longer? Maybe did you ever regret like, oh, I should have stayed 7 years or 10 years?
I don't think so. Like I said, at that time, I studied for about 2 years, worked another 5. And, even after moving back, I had a second chance to, relocate overseas at the time I was doing my MBA.
Hmm.
But in my mind, I was very sure that I wanted to, move back to India. Uh, I genuinely feel that now we are, in the beginning of a tidal wave of growth here in India or
Right,
Asia,
right.
largely speaking. And it's going to be super exciting for the next 10, 20 years. This
Got
is
it.
sort of where the action is going to be.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about how much role your family and your wife had to play in you moving back or moving back abroad to get your MBA? Can you talk a little bit about marriage in the mix of all of this?
Yeah, it's a funny story actually, because at the first time when I was thinking of moving back to India to
Hmm.
join the business, the girl that I liked was working in the US.
Okay.
Luckily she supported my decision, showed faith in my career move, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Hmm.
And a year later agreed to move to India, and I did end up marrying her, Sonal.
Nice.
And we have 2 kids together. So it started off that way, and
Hmm.
then in 2015, when I decided, it had been about 7-8 years since I had worked, and I said, working in India is good, but I need to sort of stay ahead of the race.
Hmm.
And like how you would literally update your computer software, I said, I need to upgrade a little bit,
Hmm.
understand where the world is moving. uh, and so I decided to actually opt for the full-time MBA versus the executive type MBA.
Right.
So I took a 1 year sabbatical from here, uh, and moved with my wife and our daughter to Oxford. And I
Interesting.
think it was one of the best years of our lives.
So was your wife also working there while you were there for 2 years?
No, she also took a 1 year sabbatical.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'd love to get to that. I think before that, I want to dig a little deeper into this move you had in India where you joined your father's company, which is Goka Engineering.
Yeah.
Can you talk about any kind of cultural shock that you must have had after working in the US? And we know how it is working with vendors in India.
Yeah.
It's sort of rougher on the edges. Can you talk about the challenges you faced and how you overcame them?
On the professional side, the biggest thing you realize after working, say, corporate America and moving to India is that time commitment almost means nothing here, right?
Okay.
You're given a time, a deadline, and not only do people not follow it, they don't even think of it as a big deal for not following up.
Okay.
So it takes a little getting used to. But once you understand how the system works, where 2 days before the deadline you have to send out a reminder, and like
Yeah.
the morning of the deadline you have to send a second reminder, and
Okay.
then people start getting better, and then you have to start imposing your what I call a no tolerance policy for delay. But it can't be implemented overnight. It takes time, and there's some places where you cannot do that. Like I have to work with government authorities, for example,
Hmm.
and there's no way I can challenge them in terms of why have you not committed to your deadline. So you have to learn to accept, put in buffers in your project scheduling, and eventually you start budgeting your resources appropriately, and you get used to it, I
You
guess.
adjust basically.
Yeah,
But
you
so
adjust.
didn't you think of it this way? Like it's your company and you can run it the way you choose. What would you advise people with their own company? Because there's this sense that, hey, I can change the way people work by the way I think they should work versus
Yes.
adjusting to the way they normally work in India. So how did you find a balance between these two?
So internally, I'm extremely particular in terms of time and commitments. Like I said, when it comes to both my clients and my vendors,
Hmm.
not just my staff.
Hmm.
We unlike the typical Indian office, we start early. We start the construction sites at 8 o'clock and the office at 9,
Nice.
and we actually wrap up by 6 p.m. So
Nice.
uh, it's not typical in India, but I do feel that at the end of the day, even they need few hours before they go to bed of me time or family time or whatever that is. So uh, I've always been a proponent of this start early and end early system, and
Hmm.
I'd say I've implemented it with and I'd highly recommend it to any entrepreneur out there who's joined his or her family business,
Hmm.
that in India offices do start at 11, 11:30, 12. Don't do that. Start early, and finish the day early. It's way more productive for everybody.
So there's this sense in India that some people do work only if you shout at them. Have you had that experience here?
It, so I think I have a slightly different version of that. I think people in India are trying to look busy rather than efficient. Because extra
Okay.
hours of work is valued more than finishing work
Huh.
smartly. Right?
Huh.
I mean,
Yes.
let me give you an example.
Hmm.
So during say my GE days, we used to work with our factory in Germany, right?
Hmm.
And all the people, the culture there was that whatever backlog they had for the week, they would come in early on a Friday morning and finish by Friday 3:30 or 4 p.m.
Hmm.
And then they were off for the weekend, and they would go fishing, hiking, or
Hmm.
wherever it is, and just take it easy, get some downtime.
Hmm.
Whereas the Indians in the same company would largely procrastinate on Fridays and Saturdays, and then Sunday evening they'd all wake up, they would panic, and
Huh.
on Monday they would all sound like they had a super busy week and a crazy weekend, and
Yeah.
they achieved about the same as the German contemporaries. So
Hmm.
I think unfortunately there needs to be a little change in our mindset where it's not about looking or working extra number of hours. It's about working smart and finishing right.
So, since your father was part of this company, do you find a difference between the way you lead things versus he has traditionally led things?
So there is obviously a little change in attitude because of the generation difference.
Got it. Hmm.
But I'd have to give uh, my father a lot of the credit for the being on time system, right?
Hmm.
He's just more disciplined than I think people on average our generation
Hmm.
tend to be. uh, so even in day-to-day routine things he would always teach me that do things on time. There's no
Hmm.
point delaying, you have to do it anyway.
An example of doing things on time. So I'm thinking of two things. One is the deadline for your project. Like I'm going to, I don't know, I'm making this up. Like I'm going to deliver the plumbing, finish the plumbing by this date,
Correct.
versus let's have a meeting at 5 o'clock to discuss the contract. And people will not show up at 5; they'll show up at like 7. So are these the two types of like time mismanagements that you're seeing?
So these are the common ones,
Mm.
uh, but on the construction side the ones that tend to have a bigger impact are because of resource delays. So we
Mm.
kind of changed the system where we started planning ahead and purchasing goods ahead of time.
Got it.
So when the crew reaches the site, if any particular crew reaches the site, for example, all the equipment and tools are already there. So there's no
Mhm.
more delay. He does not have an excuse saying that, this particular part is not available and this particular thing is
Ah,
not there.
right. So again, as an entrepreneur, what I have seen when I first moved to India, I was working with a group of youngsters who had just graduated from college. And I remember the first time one of them came to me and said, "My grandmother is in the hospital." And I freaked out. I was like, "Oh my God, don't worry about anything. If you need to go, we'll take care of everything." And we let him go. And then I realized that the second, third, fourth, fifth person started coming up with the grandmother in hospital. And it
Yeah.
turns out it's a very common excuse to say somebody in my family is in the hospital, because you
Yeah.
can't really argue against that. How do you tell the difference between a genuine reason versus something that's made up?
It's difficult. I think it finally comes down to the track record of that particular person,
Mm.
uh, and over time you realize there's literally a handful of people who tend to keep giving excuses, one excuse or the other,
Mm. Mm.
and they'll always have the family problem or the school problem or whatever problem, health problem, and every now and then it's probably true, but it's unfortunate that with them you have to kind of tell them, fine, you can go ahead, but the job needs to be done and the
Okay.
deadline is not changing. So
Okay.
uh, just let me know how you're planning to get it done, and typically the person will know
Mm.
uh, that the
Got
managers understood that
that.
this
Huh.
is not.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying is that you have to, as somebody who's lived abroad and come back to a business in India, you have to take your time to understand the ways things work and see what works for you. So is that, what kind of advice would you give to NRIs who have that home business but are very comfortable in the US and are afraid of this, afraid of like, how am I going to work with vendors? What kind of advice would you give them?
There's two ways to look at that. You know, First, if you're enjoying your career path, in the US or wherever it is that you are, and you do see a healthy work-life balance going forward, then by all means you should just continue living there. Have a chat with your family. Don't feel guilty. uh, if you do feel life is better there, you genuinely feel there's nothing wrong with that. But then don't sit there and complain that your friends back in India have domestic help and they have better family life. That you
Hmm.
can't go both ways.
Yeah.
But typically people who have a little more entrepreneurship mindset, you crave to do something on your own, so you want to try
Mm,
something different,
mm,
then I'd say India is a great place for you. And
mm,
if you have a family business, then you just use it as a soft landing to jumpstart your career here. uh, so what I'd advise them is talk to people, talk to friends, peers, and get multiple perspectives on how they've gone through this journey. I mean, these people should talk to somebody, a consultant like you, Nupur, who understand this system, the process, and can offer meaningful insights and guidance. See, at the end of the day, for most people, it's a life-altering decision.
Hmm.
So it's fair to invest a good amount of time and resources for that.
Got it. So you gave gold information where you also said that don't feel guilty about it. I have literally met very few people who have both, which is you said you're enjoying your job and you have a good work life balance. Mostly people have a great work life balance, but the job is like chal raha hai. They're just
Yeah.
doing it because that's the job they have on their H1. And do you feel like people who are thinking that, okay, maybe I'll get a better job, so I should continue stay here? Do you feel that India is probably, even if they have a better work-life balance, but they're not enjoying their job, it's still something to consider to move back to India?
At the stage in life that the economies are right now, I think it's a great idea. Uh,
Okay.
I think, I mean, China's sort of already ahead in the economic race, and Asia is growing fast and furious. And even other things outside of business, like, think of the current pandemic, right?
Hmm.
Uh, Asian countries and India in particular have handled it way better than the European and
Yes.
Western countries.
Yes.
And people tend to underestimate the economic impact of such things, but
Okay.
they go a long way.
Hmm.
Opportunities are going to be created in India, whether you're in the tech sector, manufacturing sector, healthcare sector. Uh, this is the area to grow. So, if you're very comfortable there and you love the lifestyle there, great. Continue living there. But if you're in two minds or conflicted, I'd say it's worth giving India a shot in the next 5-10 years.
Right. So here's the thing, a lot of people are confused about moving to India simply because the H1B seems like a one-way street. You can't just go back. What would you advise these people? Because you've moved to the UK also. You've seen life there, you've seen in the US. So can you talk a little bit about this fear of I won't be able to move back to the US if I don't like it in India?
It's not that bad. I think if you have the right qualifications and the right kind of experience on your resume, I think the world is getting more and more connected. So
Hmm.
talent is valued, and there's a good chance that going ahead, this pandemic has proven that remote work works.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's companies in the Europe and the US that can hire you. You could be spending few months in India, few months at the client site, wherever it is.
Hmm.
So I don't think the doors are permanently closed. Yeah, sure, it's a little harder versus compared to getting a degree and then getting a job right out of college.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think once you have like a good background, the opportunities are going to be there if you're skilled.
Great. So, having lived in the UK also and US, can you help us compare life, how it felt in the US versus UK?
So, I mean, I think I've been among the fortunate few that I have studied in both the countries and worked in both those
Yes,
countries.
yes.
Right.
Huh.
So, uh, so I do feel that the education system in the US is vastly superior,
Hmm.
and to add to that, it's a much larger economy that you can plug into.
Okay.
Uh, right? So the opportunities are more
Hmm.
in the US.
Hmm.
Uh, for somebody who's looking, with a clean slate, just looking to go overseas and has, the right academics and the right sort of drive,
Hmm.
I'll always recommend the US over the UK.
And what about
Where the
lifestyle?
UK,
Hmm.
yeah, where the UK scores a little bit is uh, compared to the H1 green card citizenship process in the US, which can, I'm told, take 25 or 30 years now.
Hmm.
The UK is a lot faster. So it gives you that much more flexibility that early in life.
Got it.
So, if you don't see yourself, say, working for an Amazon or a Microsoft for the next 15, 20 years, you want to try out different things.
Hmm.
The UK will give you an entrepreneur visa. Within 4 or 5 years, you get their equivalent of a green card, residency.
Hmm.
So flexibility wise, UK is easier.
It's easier. So when you came back to India, did you at any point feel like I miss the US? I wish I had stayed back. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, of course, there's times that you miss. I mean, you've created so many memories there with friends,
Yeah.
with colleagues.
Hmm.
That sure, you are going to miss certain aspects and certain things that you enjoy there or you take for granted there that you don't get here.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think I've I love to travel, and my wife and I travel quite a bit, and sometimes work allows me and takes me to places that then I don't kind of miss living there anymore. I'm happy. I'm in a good space living in India, like having a base in India
And
and
visiting.
traveling whenever I need to. Yeah.
Same here. That I feel the same. So, but do you feel like when you look back at your life in the US, do you have any regrets on whether on some parts that you should have done something or lived better or done something that you didn't do in your past?
It's an unusual one, but give me a couple of minutes to
Huh.
spell it out for you. Uh, I went to a boys' school, and we were all into sports growing up.
Huh.
And then, come engineering, and then going for MS, it all came down to acad. You got to study and you get good marks.
Huh.
And so, my early years in the US, that's all I kept focusing on. Trying to get good grades, uh, and trying to get a good job.
Hmm.
And I feel that the one thing that I was passionate about in school is playing a sport. So I
Hmm.
will advise any boy or girl who's moving overseas to study or to work, uh, pick a sport.
Hmm.
It could be a sport that you've played in India,
Hmm.
or maybe it's a sport that that always interested you, but you didn't get a chance. Learn it in the US. Most of us move to the US in our early 20s, and that's the time when it's easy to pick up a sport. Your body is cooperating with everything you throw at it.
Huh.
And what sports will do is, in addition to the whole health benefit, is it gives you access to a social culture that you
Hmm.
don't know existed. A lot of these countries, especially the US and the UK, are very passionate about their sport.
Hmm.
Uh, so the easiest way to kind of blend into the social fabric and get to know people there is through sport. You play a sport, you get to talk about the sport, and you'll see. I mean, you worked in corporate America. On Monday mornings when you go into the office, that's all people are talking about. Who won what the previous weekend.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
could be college, it could be professional sport. So play a sport. It'll go a long way in giving you sort of mental peace and happiness.
Which one were you playing? Soccer?
So I was always into tennis.
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
Tennis. Okay.
yeah, and then going after moving to the US, I decided to learn American football.
Nice.
Obviously, I was undersized for the sport, but I enjoyed it, and it helped make new friends, new conversations, and in the UK. I mean, you've studied in COP, so we learned rowing there.
Yes.
Uh, when I moved to Oxford,
Huh.
I was the only Indian in the
Nice.
college rowing team.
Nice.
So knowing a sport or wanting to learn a sport goes a long way.
So, anything else you want to share with our NRI audience, Amol? Any other tips and things that will calm them down and make them feel better about the decisions that they have to make?
I know it's easy for me to say this, but there's no really wrong decision,
Hmm.
right? Uh, whatever decision you make, you live with it for that time, and enjoy the journey, learn from your failures, and you'll always get another opportunity to pivot or change into something else. So but keep in mind that see what drives you.
Hmm.
India is a massive and untapped market,
Yes.
with a lot of opportunities, so
Yes.
make the most of it.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, Amol, for coming on this podcast. And I will see you around.
Thank you, Nupur. It's a
Thank
pleasure.